I built my bricks and I stacked them up loosely, and I'm going to make them rigid bodies and drop them onto the floor. So I'll rewind my simulation, just tumble around in my perspective view and select those bricks. And they don't have any history on them because I deleted history on the first one and then I used Control D to duplicate the rest. And that means that they don't have any history. So I'll go ahead and create soft rigid bodies, create active rigid body. And I could play this now, and actually the ball would hit them and knock them out of the way, but they don't have any gravity, so they'll just float off into space. Rewind. Let me give myself a little bit more time in my timeline. Maybe, let's say 192 frames. That's 8 seconds. So it looks cool, but what we really want here is we want these to fall and hit the ground. So I want to connect them to gravity. I already have gravity in the scene, so I don't need to create another gravity field. All I need to do is select all those bricks, and then I can shift select my gravity node. If you're really paranoid about whether they're really selected or not, of course, you can always go into the outliner and double check. You want to see the gravity field selected and all the bricks selected. Doesn't matter what order you select them in. Then just go to the Fields menu and choose Affect Selected Objects, and that will create the connection. Let's take a look at what we get. Select one of my bricks, press F, rewind the simulation, and it could use some work. I can add some friction and so on, finesse it a little bit, but it's essentially getting there. The next step is I want to set an initial state for these bricks. I want them to drop and then be at their resting position on frame 1. So what I'll do once again is I'll just rewind to frame 1 and then step through the simulation one frame at a time until they're settled down. So by around frame 10 or 12, they should be fairly well settled down. So I'll just go ahead and select them and go back into the Solvers menu. Under Initial State, I'll find Set for Selected. It's important that you select all the bricks and only the bricks, then choose Initial State Set for Selected. If you accidentally set the initial state on the ball or the catapult arm, then your simulation won't run correctly. And of course, if you chose Set for All Dynamic in this menu, it would set the initial state for all dynamic objects in the scene on the current frame. So we want to just do Set for Selected, boom. Then when we rewind to frame 1, they're already settled down on frame 1. And I'll press play. And they don't seem to be jittering around or doing anything strange, so that looks great. Now that I've got those essentially working, I'll just finesse my simulation a little bit, select all the bricks, and then go into the channel box, and I'm looking for those rigid body attributes such as friction and damping and bounciness. So these are supposed to be pretty big blocks of a castle wall, so they probably will need a lot more friction, maybe a value of 0.5 on both static and dynamic friction. Let's see what that gives me. That's better, but you'll see this one's sliding out of control here. So let me also increase the friction on the ground plane. So I'll select that ground plane, scroll down looking for static and dynamic friction, increase that to 0.5. And again, rewind, test the simulation. Sometimes they do have a little bit too much sliding action. You might have to increase the friction beyond what you think you might need, but remember that you can always bake the simulation and then edit the keyframes after the fact and kind of combine dynamics with traditional keyframing techniques. So I think I'll take one more pass at maybe selecting the bricks and increasing their friction or their mass. Let's try that. If I increase their mass to a value of maybe 3 instead of 1, that should get them to hopefully stay put a little bit better. There we go. So somewhere in between, maybe a mass of 2. And a bounciness, I'll maybe bring that down to maybe 0.4 for those bricks. But yes, just season to taste until you get the look that you want. So I'm just going to increase that friction up to about 0.8. And I think that's about as good as I'm going to get for this particular simulation. So if I'm happy with what I've got so far, I should go ahead and save the scene. So I'll do save scene as, and I'm going to call this one Catapult 02 Unbaked. Click Save. And now I'm ready to bake the simulation. Remember that I just want to select only the objects that are moving, so my bricks, the ball, and the catapult arm. Maybe I'll do that in the outliner once again. I've got it minimized here, so I can select all the bricks. But where are the others? I'm looking for the ball and the catapult arm. Well, in fact, they're underneath this catapult car locator. I've actually parented everything to a locator. I did that so that if I wanted to, I could move the catapult and rotate it to a different place in the scene. But here they are. I've got the ball. I'll control click on that. And I've got the catapult arm low LOD. I'll control click on that as well. Go ahead and run the simulation and bake it. Edit, keys, bake simulation, and it'll do the whole timeline by default. Let that play through. And if that's good, I'll go and check it. Can scrub through now, actually. But you'll notice that my performance may not be as good as I might expect, and that's because those rigid bodies are still running in the background. So although I can scrub, I've still got a bunch of garbage collection to do. So I'll go to Edit, delete all by type rigid bodies, and Edit, delete all by type static channels. And I've cleaned up the animation so that I can go ahead and render it now. So last thing I'll do is go ahead and save that scene as Catapult 02 Baked. And now this scene is ready to render. I'll turn the high LOD layer back on. And if you want, you can set up a camera and render this. But that is the end of our lesson in rigid body dynamics in Maya.